Hey everyone, welcome back to Upside Down Data. Today I want to talk about BNB and why I think it's an asset that slept on too much in the crypto space. If you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter. A lot of updates, better indicators, and more over there. So BNB is an asset that if you've been in the crypto space, you probably at the very least heard of. You're probably quite familiar with it. You know, it's heavily associated with the Binance exchange. You know, it's the asset that's used to pay for transaction fees on the Binance Smart Chain, and then also the second, Binance chain that exists. And there's also some usage of it in the Binance exchange itself. But I think when a lot of people think about BNB, they kind of think about it as being this kind of boring, not too exciting, nothing to really all that hyped up about asset. And I just don't think that people really pay much attention to it. And I want to talk today about why I think that's been a mistake, historically speaking, for investors. A lot of investors have really missed the boat on BNB, which has actually been an extremely well-performing asset, not just on its own right, but compared to other big assets in the space. So let's talk about that. So I'm showing you here on TradingView just the price history of BNB, and it's actually incredibly impressive. I don't think a lot of people talk about this. BNB to its all-time high was up over 1,000,000% move to the upside, and at current levels it's up about 426,000% to the upside. Just crazy massive appreciation that's not seen on many assets. And obviously everyone always talks about Ethereum and Bitcoin for their crazy percent moves up, but BNB has done quite well through its life as well, just from an overall return perspective from Genesis. And then what I want to talk about today, or the first thing I want to talk about today about why I think partly people have been sleeping on BNB too much, is how it's performed more recently and historically against other big assets in the space, namely Bitcoin and Ethereum. And one of the things that I'm just zooming in here to note about BNB is just look at how it's behaved ever since February of 21. That more or less it's just gone sideways. Even in this really extreme bear market that we've been in, it's more or less just kind of held its value, whereas a lot of other altcoins have gone way below their values back in this space, way below their summer values, which, BNB just only barely took out the low from the summer of 21. A lot of other assets being down substantially more. And if we just look at the drawdown of BNB currently, it's down 59%, a max drawdown of 73. But again, that's nothing compared to what a lot of other altcoins did. A lot of other assets bled way further in this bear market. And one way that we can actually just visualize this is just to look at BNB compared to other assets, particularly Bitcoin and Ethereum, which are often considered to be the least risky assets in the space. And what's notable is that if we just look at the BNB Bitcoin chart, so this is basically the value of BNB denominated in Bitcoin. That's what's over here. You can see that, and basically the way you read these metrics is that if it's going up, that means that BNB is appreciating versus Bitcoin. If it's going down, BNB is depreciating versus Bitcoin. And by and large, BNB has almost never had any meaningful depreciation against Bitcoin. The biggest one was when Bitcoin ran, going into early 21. Then, of course, BNB followed and blew it out of the water. But by and large, there's just been kind of stepping stones of BNB just up against Bitcoin. And what I think is really notable right now is that we're actually at a space where we put a new all-time high against Bitcoin. You'll see that BNB is now more valuable in terms of Bitcoin than has ever been in the past. Even at the height of the mania of the bull market back in 21, BNB is now at its highest valuation against Bitcoin ever. In the depths of the bear market, in the worst of times when you'd expect altcoins to bleed the most against Bitcoin, BNB is actually appreciated against Bitcoin. It's actually held its value better than Bitcoin has. And that speaks to very strong relative strength. Because again, Bitcoin is usually heuristically thought of as being the asset that will bleed the least in a bear market, that will hold up the best in a bear market, other than stablecoins, any kind of volatile crypto asset. BNB has actually been outperforming it. And so in some ways, BNB has been that safest of havens, not Bitcoin, which is interesting. And if we also look at Ethereum, it's telling a similar story. Even during this time when ETH was rallying like crazy recently, again, this is the weekly charts, this is condensed down, but rallying like crazy into the merge, BNB was holding its own against Ethereum during that time. And in fact, it's been in an uptrend ever since, April of this year, just a notable kind of move up. Now, it hasn't set an all-time high against Ethereum yet like it has against Bitcoin, but it's pretty darn close, right? It's actually going up towards the top of that range rather than, bleeding against Ethereum. And again, Ethereum is often talked about, second to Bitcoin, as being kind of one of the least risky assets. BNB's showing, a lot of strength here. It's actually showing that it has more endurance, basically, in this bear market. It's not bleeding against these assets, which a lot of people would have expected. And this is rarely talked about. Some people talk about this, but most people do not really give BNB a second chance. They don't talk about it. They're always just talking about Bitcoin, talking about Ethereum. But just looking at the data, how can you not talk about BNB in this context? How can you not put it in that same category? It has been behaving as a very, obviously it's drawn down quite a bit, but it's drawn down less than basically any other asset or most other assets in the space. Certainly Bitcoin and Ethereum has been holding up extremely well against them in this bear market, which, you wouldn't expect from most altcoins. So let's talk a little bit about why BNB might be holding up so well in these bearish times, especially against Bitcoin and Ethereum. Well, one thing that is important to note is that BNB, first of all, has utility. It has utility within the Binance chains. There's the smart chain. There's also the Binance chain that runs in the Cosmos ecosystem. And so it pays for transaction fees. And one of the things that's been pretty consistent with BNB, with the Binance smart chain, it tends to be one of the chains with the highest values locked in DeFi. Currently it's sitting at number 3. It for a very long time was sitting up at number 2. Ethereum's obviously, basically always been number 1, probably will be number 1 for foreseeable future. But this brings in a lot of demand for the asset. You need BNB to transact on the Binance Smart Chain to the extent that people are using that chain still, even in the depths of a bear market for DeFi. There'll still be demand for BNB. That will bring in some, reason for this to be holding its head above water, for it to be doing well in a bear market. There's natural demand. And the other thing that BNB has going for it, which is unique in a lot of ways, at least relative to a lot of other, assets like Ethereum that we talk about, is it has another driver of demand. And that's because you can actually use BNB to get discounts on your trading fees on the Binance exchange and also Binance US. It's a 25% discount, which for people who are doing high frequency trading actually matters quite a bit. That's a notable boon to profit, to be able to reduce your transaction fees on these centralized exchanges by 25%. And that's a unique advantage that BNB has that something like Ethereum that doesn't have that. The only native drivers for Ethereum are people wanting to use the Ethereum chain. It's not that people are using Ethereum on some centralized DEX or excuse me, some centralized exchange and then getting benefit from it from that way. So there's two kind of native drivers of demand for BNB that give it some legs, give it some strength that a lot of other assets can't stand on. So for those different reasons, I think we can just see it. It's not just those reasons make sense why it might do well. We're also literally seeing that it has been doing extremely well during these bearish times. So I think it's useful to pay attention. So those are some things from a relative strength perspective I wanted to talk about BNB. The final thing I wanted to talk about was just talk about some of our models that we have here at the channel and talk a little bit about where BNB sits right now from a risk reward perspective and also from a trend perspective. Okay, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about BNB from a risk reward perspective. So this is our risk indicator we have here on the channel, the upside downside potential indicator applied to BNB. So this is the BNB price chart, and this is color coded to the UDPI level. So let's just go ahead and flip to the raw levels of the model. So that's the white line here, UDPI level on the y-axis, and then the price over here. So of course, higher risk being at the higher ends of the UDPI range up towards 5, low risk being down towards -5. So you can see that we really spiked up, going up into, into the all-time high. We were in this kind of really high risk zone for BNB, and then we cooled off in the summer, went back up to a bit of a overextension, a little bit above 1, going into kind of this double top, and then we've been going down. One of the things that I think is notable about BNB right now is that in this big drawdown that we saw going into the bear market, a lot of other assets in the crypto space went all the way down to this lowest level here. They exhausted their downside potential. They really kind of went all the way down to the bottom of the scale. Notably, BNB didn't do that, right? It went down and actually bottomed at around -3. So what does that tell us? Well, one of the things that's interesting about this, so again, the upside downside potential indicator, as this name suggests, the idea is that as you get further and further down, you're exhausting more and more of the downside potential that the model thinks is realistic. Likewise, as you're going up, you're exhausting the upside potential that the model thinks is realistic. So this means that BNB found a bottom without having to exhaust all the downside potential that was necessary. And with all the things we've been talking about with relative strength, this kind of makes sense that there's been natural drivers of demand that have stepped in to prevent BNB from drawing down as far as the model thought might be plausible. And so that can be seen as a sign of relative strength, that it didn't have to draw down as far as some of the other assets. And so when we look at it right now, the model still thinks there's greater upside potential than downside potential that's realistic, and that there is, notable downside potential that is possible. But what's notable about this is that, again, with BNB having this relative strength, it means that we may or may not really have to go down to these super low levels of risk to find a decent risk reward point. And if we ever did, that might just be especially high risk reward given the relative strength that BNB has been in. So, obviously I don't think BNB is just going to go on its own and go ripping to the upside without the rest of the market rallying. And so my base case for BNB and the rest of the crypto space is that at best we're going to kind of chop sideways from here. But what this does look like is, when we've been down at these levels in the past, it's really been pretty good accumulation zones before it moves to the upside. And so, assuming that we don't get some horrible blow up across markets that really tanks crypto generally, more or less the risk reward profile is looking decent here. Not financial advice, of course. That's what the model is telling us. Then the final thing I wanted to talk about with BNB was just from a trend perspective. So if that's the case, that we're at a decent risk reward perspective, is there trend information that's telling us that we might be moving to the upside soon? So this is the MDC for BNB. I've zoomed it in to everything since since the beginning of 2020, just so we can see what's going on more recently. But generally speaking, what this model is able to do quite well is catch early on the beginning of these big moves to the upside, and then also tell you early when a big move to the downside might be coming. So we can see is that we flipped the MDC to the bullish side. So that's what this yellow line is. This is the critical level. You want to be above it. That's bullish. Below it is bearish. And now we're just kind of flirting around it. We're kind of playing around this level. The critical level right now is about $274. We've been right around that area, as I've been recording this. So really there's some indecision in trend. The BNB is kind of hard to figure out if it's going to be gaining a bullish trend or a bearish trend. I think most likely broader markets are going to determine which way it breaks, right? If broader markets get more bullish, I think it breaks to the upside and it could actually see a decent move, especially from that risk reward perspective we've been seeing. A decent move to the upside, even if it's not going to all-time highs, could be in the cards. If we break to the downside, maybe we have to see another leg down. And I wouldn't expect BNB to be the only thing setting that new leg down, right? I'd expect Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. And it's notable that BNB is well off of its lows back here, whereas Bitcoin is basically down at those lows right now. So if Bitcoin sets new lows, it could be that BNB only has to go and retest this low from just a few months ago. So that's what I'm seeing from some of our indicators, that generally speaking, BNB is in a good risk reward space. And, right now we're waiting for a more definitive turn in the trend before getting too, confident one way or the other. So we're kind of flirting around the MDC critical level right now. So if we just go back and just look at the BNB chart, just to kind of sum up what I'm thinking about BNB is I think that BNB has been slept on in the crypto space. I think not enough people talk about it, not enough people appreciate how well it's done, and especially not enough people appreciate how well it's doing against Bitcoin and Ethereum. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that this is just guaranteed to go on. Some people might say that because it's been doing so well against Bitcoin and Ethereum, that a mean reversion's likely, that that's more likely to start bleeding against Bitcoin and Ethereum now than not. And that's very possible. But again, the unique thing about BNB is it has demand drivers, like its use in the Binance exchanges, that Ethereum, Bitcoin don't have, or a lot of other crypto assets do not have. And so from that perspective, it would actually not shock me if BNB continues to do quite well against Bitcoin, continues to do quite well against Ethereum. Time will tell, but something I think will be interesting to watch. All right, if you like the content, remember to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and follow us on Twitter. A lot of updates, better indicators, and more over there.